This chapter was the definition of heartbreaking. So many beautiful moments captured within such a small time frame, the second last chapter within the entirety of the story. The experience that is known as Attack on Titan is coming to a conclusion in under a month. Knowing that a percentage of people are not going to like this chapter, are not going to like the outcome of the story because Eren Yeager didn't commit global genocide, or just genuinely don't like the direction that it's going in, that's perfectly fine. The only advice I can give is value the moments that you did from Attack on Titan. Try and find some beauty within these chapters, because even if you hate the direction, even if you wanted to see Eren succeed or Eren potentially survive, there is beyond a lot of great things here. Stuff that you can connect to, stuff that you can appreciate and value, and see all of the hard effort that Isayama has put in for so many years reach its conclusion. The reason I mention this is because the conflict for Attack on Titan regarding its ending and the direction that it's going has been so, I want to say obnoxiously loud, but also pretty powerful. For some odd reason, I thought it would be something that would blow over rather quickly and people would just kind of either get on board or stop talking about it in general. But because it's so consistent, because it's so loud, I see it constantly that a lot of people are disappointed that Isayama is going this way, to the point where I often see it being called one of the worst endings that people could experience. And I'm sitting here and I'm kind of curious on how do we even get to that point? What mindset would I have to be in to be either disappointed with Attack on Titan or truly hate where the story is going? The most obvious answer is that I'm not getting my own way. I don't like the ending. Ending bad because it's not my ending. So that somewhat makes sense. But I think the more nuanced version would be some things feel rushed, some things feel too mysterious or left up in the air. Maybe some things feel like a cop-out, and while I can understand all those arguments, the only true advice I could probably give, if you even want to call it that, is don't let it devalue your experience. If you don't like Attack on Titan and what it's doing right now, that's perfectly fine. Each to their own opinion, and you can end off the story and the legacy that it's built absolutely despising it. That's perfectly fine. But trying to convince other people that it's bad, or trying to manipulate how they feel towards the ending that they enjoy, very disingenuous. Wouldn't recommend doing it. You're probably going to get into an argument, probably not worth your time. You don't have to like it, but try to actively avoid telling other people that they can't like it. You can engage in a conversation. I feel like that's perfectly normal and shouldn't be addressed. Your standard agree to disagree, debate, argument, whatever it may be, but when it gets toxic, just back away, because I know comment section is going to be filled to the brim. So I guess this is not only a message for people watching and people that enjoy my videos, but for obviously everyone else. I would say avoid Reddit and probably most likely avoid Twitter. Unless you're looking for an argument or you're looking for a debate, that's where you can go. I apologize for rambling, but for me, this chapter was heartbreaking. It was absolutely beautiful and broke me very methodically throughout it. It was like this gradual build-up of cracking and splitting and building to this point where everything would shatter into pieces, where the reality of some sort of quote-unquote happy ending would be a possibility. In retrospect, anything other than global genocide and annihilation is most likely considered a happy ending, but I guess happier ending would be one where Eren survives. I've been pretty much set in stone and confident that Eren is not going to live by the end of this story. Unless there is more here within the final chapter, I think keeping him alive, especially after this Mikasa stuff, is borderline disrespectful. It almost devalues everything he was pushed to put himself through, the emotions, Mikasa's mindset, her empowerment, and the growth that she's gone through, and pretty much everything that has been done. Keeping him alive makes everything that he chose to do and the decisions he made to get to where he wanted to be borderline redundant. Building up his character with such detail and emphasis on decisions and emotions to everything that he was pushed towards, that he pushed himself through, the very difficult decisions he makes, keeping him alive and thriving or in prison or whatever subject of life that you want to give him after everything that he has done just does not sit well with me. I don't think Isayama is going to go down that route, but there's definitely always that possibility. And a lot of the final chapter maybe could contextualize it to make it more of a possibility, or at least one that's believable. But if you want to know how I feel about the ending of Attack on Titan and the different ways that it could go, I've made a litany of stuff talking about it, on where Eren may lie, what his final thing may be, and how this all leads towards a potential final conversation within the paths, within Ymir's realm. So again, I've rambled on top of my previous ramble. The first half of this chapter focuses on than everyone else. The surrounding area away from Eren, away from Mikasa, and basically gives you a better understanding on where the rumbling is, what people are doing, the conflict that is going on, and how it's all swirling together into this one big hot pot now. Luckily enough, it still has its clarity, but it's tipping on that edge of almost blurring together, especially when you start adding things that are a little bit odd to comprehend or not so easy to digest, like the hallucinogenia or the big worm thing. You have the rumbling stop. All of the colossal wall titans are just vibing, doing absolutely nothing. Everyone's kind of in this sense of disbelief, sense of accomplishment, and are rather happy that the rumbling has concluded. And while they do see the hallucinogenia down on the ground away from Eren, kind of crawling towards the massive mountainous range that they're on top of, they're still somewhat on edge, but are quickly wrapped up in this sense of happiness when they see individuals or family members that they haven't seen in a long time. Also, it turns out that the weirdly cut off battle between Annie's father and the other Malian soldiers and generals wasn't actually legitimate. It did turn out to be one of those so you thought type of situations. It turns out another head general came in and actually stopped the conflict before it got super serious, and basically says within this chapter that we have to work together if we want to get through to this, reconfirming that faith that the only way that they're going to rebuild and reconstruct society and the massive portion of Mali that has been destroyed, being the most pivotal in terms of military might and political power, is that if they do work together and coexist, so they don't breed this type of hatred again. And I understand a lot of people are not going to like that because maybe it feels a little bit too forced or rushed or simplistic, but just because these people that are witnessing the event of the rumbling, which I think is completely understandable, I would 100% work with my enemy if I seen a litany of colossal titans that are just horrendous. Mind you, if I feared these things for my whole lifetime at this point, I've been manipulated to see these things as monsters and devils. Yes, I would work with my enemy, and I would come to some mutual agreement or understanding like, hey, look, I won't hurt you, you don't hurt me, because if we continue to do this back and forth, we're going to create this thing again, and I don't want to witness that a second time in my lifetime. This doesn't mean that the hatred is completely gone. There is going to be pockets of resistance. There's going to be people in political power that do not agree with it and see this event as an active attempt at war. But who are they going to fight it against? Because the people that have saved the world, people that have saved Mali, the people that are somewhat agreeing to work with Eldians, are some of the most manipulated and warped individuals that were born and raised to hate Eldians from their very core being since they were a child. If you can change those individuals, you can change the perception and the emotions of some of the more political ones that aren't even connected to this event at all, maybe ones that aren't even located within Mali. And they have a lot of things to use, but the only massive one that you need is that the people that saved this earth, that saved the billions of lives on this planet, was Eldians, and also the combined efforts of Eldians and Malians, and that the reason that this thing happened to begin with is because of the hatred between Eldians and Malians. So why would you even want to try and risk that happening once again? I get it, political bigwigs can be very obnoxious and ignorant, and there's probably going to be people like that, but I feel like it's done pretty spot on for what it's trying to do. So basically the only two people on the battlefield right now are Armin and his colossal titan, and Reiner and the Armin titan, obviously. And there's two things. One, the hallucinogenia, the worm, the life form, whatever you want to call it, is somewhat crawling towards the mountainous range that everyone else is on top of. The family members, the swirling bundle of happiness, and the Malian Eldian people working somewhat together. You then also have a massive explosion behind the colossal titan, and it turns out it's Eren in his humanoid titan form away from the hallucinogenia. So there's a distance between them, and obviously Eren is trying to get back to the hallucinogenia, and the person in his way, Armin and Reiner. This is all somewhat stitched together with Mikasa and the headaches that she keeps having. She's trying to remember Eren, the words that he said, and she keeps coming back to the same conclusion. She's trying so desperately to find some sort of reasoning to persuade herself not to try and kill Eren, because realistically she is the only person on the battlefield right now that has enough power to do some type of damage with the Titan shifters. For any sort of human close combat, she's the only person that can do it. That's not devaluing Jean and Connie. Mikasa's more so on the side of Levi than the side of those two, and Levi, as we know it right now, is unfortunately out of commission. He's had a lot of massive injuries, so she's she's pleading pretty much with herself on why this has to be the way. Why do we have to kill Eren? And it's truly taking a toll on her. She's trying to force herself to make that decision, to make those choices, to bring things to a conclusion, to say goodbye to the person that she loves. And it's heartbreaking. And very quickly, that brief swirling aura of happiness with everyone having a nice little reunion is interrupted by not only Eren's explosion and turning into a titan, but also the hallucinogenia doing something. It's releasing gas, and this gas is the exact same thing that Zeke used in a very specific village known as Ragako. Probably butchered that name. Basically Connie's village. A type of gas was being thrown in there that was filled with Zeke's spinal fluid, but this isn't the same thing. This is probably a 10 times bigger and more viral and dense version of it. This is the hallucinogenia. This is the life form itself, because it raises a question. Everyone's super suspect of this situation, and obviously the first people that understand what it's probably doing is Connie and all of our main cast. They know this isn't a good thing. They know that every Eldian up in that swirling pit of happiness is about to get turned into a titan. But this leads me down a path of curiosity, because while Connie's village was very artificial in a sense, using Zeke's spinal fluid, this being the hallucinogenia brings up a lot of questions. Is this life form doing this as a self-defense mechanism? Because technically it's detached from Eren right now, and we haven't necessarily seen it do much of anything on its own. We know that it directly parallels the hallucinogenia in real life, with the previous chapter showing a version of it. I'm thinking, is this more so creature or animal instincts taking place and not Eren actually doing it? Because they do somewhat shift the blame to Eren on why he would do this, and I'm kind of curious if he still even has control, which everything is pointing into the direction of no, because he's trying to reconnect with it so he can start the rumbling. But if he can still control gas coming out of it, why wouldn't he just control the worm to turn around and try and finesse Reiner and Armin at the exact same time? It makes me think that the two are completely separate from one another, which would make a lot of sense. Hallucinogenia, or is a life form on its own, is an organism that has its own self-defense mechanism, and this is it. It's very fitting, as you can tell, releasing gas that turns nearby Eldians into titans. Could you also say that it's Ymir doing it? Probably so, but I don't necessarily want to add that idea in there just because it kind of throws everything out of proportion a little bit too much. There'd be no instant or inherent reason for her to do that and know that it would somewhat be successful, if that makes sense. Whereas if you kind of leave it up to the hallucinogenia acting on its own regard, because it feels threatened and cornered, releasing that gas feels a lot more impactful. That it too is trying to survive and stay alive as long as possible and reconnect with its host. And then obviously last but not least, you can throw it back to Eren, and he still somewhat has control over it to release that gas. The people that get caught up in it is Jean, Connie, and Gabi from our main cast, and everyone else. Their parents, families, loved ones, all of them. I think it happened in such a beautiful but also terrifying type of way. They knew what was going to happen. Everyone that wasn't affected by it, Ackermans and Titan Shifters, leave with Falco so quickly, so desperately to get out of there before they all turned, and you see everyone kind of hugging each other and waiting and anticipating it to happen. It's a very scary scene and kind of hurts to witness, especially because it's led in by Jean and Connie's conversation. Them reminiscing about graduation and how they said that they would one day save the world. After this, you see a rain titans. Obviously, the life form or hallucinogenia being very overpowered has done all this to summon an army. So now he has all of these titans at his disposal, so he can turn around and face Reiner and Armin to try and get back to Eren. I have to applaud Reiner for standing in its way. I don't even know where you would start to try and fight a giant worm that just released gas that turned a good couple of hundred of people into titans. But Reiner being Reiner, he's moving on forward, and I love how Isayama is playing with this life or death situation for him. He could very easily survive, but he could very easily die. It all depends on the final chapter. For me, he literally lays on top of both of those outcomes, and I think it's perfect for the type of character that he is. One that has always wanted to die, one that has gave up incredibly quickly, is fighting so desperately and wholeheartedly with so much emphasis. This man is not giving up, even through all of the pain that he's just experienced, all the injuries, but also emotional. Seeing his close friends be killed and knowing that that he has to fight against them. A very hard pill to swallow, especially in the midst of battle, but you gotta give him that respect. He is an absolute force to be reckoned with. And then right after this, you have friend versus friend. Armin versus Eren, both in their colossal forms, brawling it out. Everything within here just feels so personal already, but the biggest things have yet to come, and that is in the form of Mikasa. So while Reiner, Annie, and Peak fight the hallucinogenia or the life form, and Mikasa go to help Armin, and obviously find a way to kill Eren once and for all. This is easily where we get the most powerful moment within the chapter, the most powerful moment for Mikasa. You remember chapter 1 when Eren had a very long dream, woke up crying, thought Mikasa's hair was really long? This moment is meant to parallel it. It's meant to be the opposite version of it. And there's a good reason why they're actually connected to one another so directly. Mikasa is trying so desperately to come to a conclusion. She just wants to go back to their home, which gives birth to this fantasy. A time where Eren didn't proceed with the rumbling. A time when Mikasa was able to confess her feelings and they actually ran away, living in peace with the person that he loves. I like how the opening of it with Mikasa waking up and seeing a nice beautiful hut and trees, and the location in itself is incredibly accurate to the emotion and the bodily movement of the very first chapter. Just obviously Mikasa being within Eren's places time. We come to find that this vision or fantasy is built off the day that Mikasa and Eren had that very personal conversation, and instead of not confessing their appreciation and love for one another, they actually did. And they abandoned everything right then and there and left. They ran away, and it led them to here where they live in this house together and kind of waiting out their time till Eren dies, but enjoying the moments that they have. Even Mikasa recognizes that she's not meant to be here, that this can't be real, that this has to be a dream. You then see this fantasy start to crumble as they are embracing each other. Eren goes on to this speech of saying that when he dies, throw the scarf away, to promise him that you'll live long after I'm gone and forget about me and be free. You then see the fantasy start to blur into reality, where a lot of the Titan markings is appearing across Eren's face. That this alternate fantasy that potentially could have been a possibility that Mikasa wished for so deeply is starting to float away. It's cracking and crumbling the closer she comes to her decision. And then the most important thing is that she makes it. She comes to a conclusion that she will kill Eren, wearing the scarf that he gave her, but she won't forget about him, nor will she throw away the scarf. That dedication, that build up to that conclusion probably had to be one of the most hardest things for her to do. It's very empowering. And I think seeing that fantasy precede all of these events and watching it shatter in front of her eyes is potentially a reality that easily could have been a thing. But I do, however, think there's a little bit more to it than just being a fantasy. And it comes with the very final moments of that fantasy and the final moments of the chapter in itself. So it turns out Eren is in the mouth of his colossal titan, and Mikasa is determined to be the one to kill him. And before long, she manages to get within the mouth where Eren is located, and they finally have a face-to-face counter, with her looking very sad and melancholic, but happy that she gets to see him one last time. And then Eren's look is filled with so many different things. It's so nuanced that I feel like you could add your own interpretation to it that just works in every direction that it goes. But he looks so many different things, from sad to thankful to portionally regretful to knowing that this was all going to happen. It's all compiled on that face while he stares in her eyes while she brings this sword across his neck. It's such a blanket expression that's filled with so much beautiful depth for me, and I think for a lot of people as well. The final panels you get is two different variations of one another. One, the fantasy coming to a conclusion with her saying, "See you later, Eren." And remember that, because that's going to be very important, and it stems from chapter 1 with the exact same words that Eren heard when he was sitting underneath that tree. She's holding his head in her hands, and then you jump back to the current events and Eren is completely beheaded and she's kissing him on the lips. And then right behind them you have a Ymir that is smiling very faintly, almost like she's regained faith in this situation, or she's seeing something that reminds her of her younger self, almost like it mimics or triggers something that she either wished she could have had or potentially did have when she was alive. It's very interesting just with her being within that panel and her witnessing the events unfold in the way that it is. We don't know what her agenda is or what mindset she sits within because she's so conflicted and back and forth and has so much detail surrounding her that it's almost impossible to seat her within any motive. But even though this panel is absolutely beautiful and is very symbolic and biblical, I think it's a reference to a very specific thing. I can't remember the name for the life of me, something with an S. It's like Salome or something like that. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's just artistically a reference to that. Not necessarily the story, because the stories aren't nowhere near one another, that's for sure. But just in a biblical, stylistic, artistic way, I wouldn't be surprised if a bit of inspiration came from that. It's not necessarily one for one, but that biblical scene is very iconic for having a woman kiss her lover that was beheaded. So the more you know. But what else is actually here regarding Mikasa's little fantasy? And how does it connect back to chapter 1? For me, there's two different ways that you can interpret this, and one is more prominent to Mikasa, empowering her further and ending her in a very valuable and emotional way, and the other one is Eren bringing through the fantasy on his own regard, basically bringing it up to Mikasa, which unfortunately, at least in my head, somewhat devalues Mikasa a little bit. So two different outcomes, two different ways you can think about it. One stems from Mikasa, one stems from Eren. For context and clarity, Eren wakes up to the words, "See you later, Eren." And then what he sees is Mikasa trying to wake him up, and then he starts crying. He also goes to mention in a way that seems like he's a little bit bummed out that her hair has actually gotten longer. So then is Eren waking up from that dream. Mikasa's fantasy is the parallel to it, and what I think somewhat directly connects to it. So I believe that Mikasa has built this fantasy or this vision that she wished she could have had and hoped for it so deeply that it takes into consideration the events where they would have split off from the group, how Eren wouldn't have become the person that he is now and wouldn't have went forward with the attack on Marley and throwing away his humanity. Instead, he ran away with Mikasa. He was spending the rest of his life in seclusion with her. For me, that is the ending that she wanted. And I think it also doubles back on the idea that valuing the smaller moments within life or valuing specific things is what gives your life meaning, is what gives it worth and value to continue forward, that you should appreciate these moments. We've seen Armin's version, we definitely seen Zeke's version, and we actually seen a little bit of Ymir's version. And something that continuously shackled her to the royal blood is because she didn't want to let that side of her go. At least that is how I interpreted it. The reason why she was stuck within the past, within the realms, is because what kept her moving forward was also the thing that was shackling her to the past, the moments that she valued, the people, the emotions, the love, the friendships that she still connected to, that she still envisioned. She couldn't do it on her own regard, but as soon as Eren came into the picture, it became a lot clearer for her and she was able to do it. And you've seen the emotion that she made, things that she lost to free herself. So I find it very fitting that what she's witnessing now, and the first time we've ever seen her smile since that event and look so somber about the whole situation, is when Mikasa and Eren kissing each other. She's seeing love blossom in front of her eyes that is most likely giving her a bit of hope, a bit of reasoning to rekindle those things that she threw away, those memories that she held so long onto, potentially even remembering the good points of the past that she had when she was alive. If you've noticed throughout this time, it seems like she's resembled as a very young child when we knew that she was a lot older when she actually passed away. So how does this connect to Mikasa's fantasy and chapter 1 and Eren and everything along those lines? What I think Mikasa has done within this moment of kissing Eren or holding his head or just coming in contact with him is that Eren has also perceived this event. He's seen these memories that she has envisioned and has taken them and shown them to his childhood self. So what his childhood self was actually seeing was Mikasa saying, "See you later, Eren." And you can take it in both ways, that she's saying it in person within the Titan mouth or within the fantasy where her hair was a lot longer. So you can connect it to two different perceptions. One, he's still somewhat dreaming and seeing Mikasa not as a child but as that fantasy version with her hair super long, or he's looking at the physical child Mikasa and comparing that length of her hair to the short hair she has right now. And you're probably wondering, why would this be a thing? Why would would Eren see this specific event or emotion in such an obscure type of way that makes him cry? Deep down, I want to believe that Eren is sending this very powerful fantasy memory or subconscious that Mikasa actually has of this future that could have been a possibility to his childhood self to hopefully persuade him to take a different direction. It seems somewhat fitting for how the Attack Titan abilities works, which explains how it's even possible, but regardless, he has the Founding Titan abilities. Anything's somewhat possible with that thing if it's still got some leftover residue or he's still connected to whatever degree, but I like the idea of him sending them back to hopefully convince his childhood self not to go in that direction, to try and showcase Mikasa's emotions, that the Ackerman thing isn't legitimate whatsoever, that she genuinely appreciates and loves you, and to convince his childhood self to hang on to her as long as possible, to make the right choice. Go down this future where they live this somewhat happier ending for both of them. In the grand scheme of things, regarding Eldian people, it's definitely not, but for them personally, it is. Because this is all fueled from Mikasa, it empowers her even further. This is basically everything surrounding her, but the complete opposite and other version or variation of this is that Eren is the one to manipulate and craft this memory from nothing. It's either he's seen the fantasy version or he's seen the ending version, his final moments, and it's because of Mikasa and him connecting. But you can see the problem with that if Eren is the one that has manipulated and constructed this fantasy is that, like I said, it somewhat takes away the importance of Mikasa and doesn't empower her or prop her up as much. Instead, it somewhat focuses on Eren and still kind of plays on this manipulative mindset that he is actually in, and I don't think that's a reality. It's definitely a possibility, hence why I mentioned it, but it's something that I don't really think should be a thing. There's nothing that really comes from it, and if it was played upon even further, kind of devalues this very personal, intimate, and emotional moment that both Mikasa and Eren have. So I think it should all stem from Mikasa, that this is the fantasy and the life and the world that she created, that she wanted so desperately. It took her so long to come to this conclusion to kill Eren, and Eren seen it. When they finally connected right before his death in physical form, he's seen what Mikasa wanted, and within that he sent it all the way back to his childhood self, and his childhood self witnessed those events. And then you add on that little spice or flavor that Eren sent it back with the intention of trying to convince his childhood self to believe Mikasa, to believe that she genuinely loved him, and to show his childhood self this was all legitimate. It's not the Ackerman curse, it's nothing else. She wholeheartedly loves you. This is just my loose interpretation of it, but I'm sure there's a lot of different ways other people have perceived it, so it makes me very curious on what you all think, because I know a lot of you are going to have massive opinions for this whole chapter in general, but more specifically for this Mikasa and Eren stuff, which I'll say right now I absolutely loved. I thought it was beyond beautiful and is such an emotional, engaging way to bring everything to a conclusion. It broke me, and it's going to break a lot of different individuals. I've already seen it with people's reaction to this chapter. I sincerely apologize for this video being extremely long. Let me know how you felt about the chapter. Are you loving it? Are you hating it? Do you appreciate the things that Isayama is doing? Or did you wish it was going to go in a different direction? I'd love to hear your thoughts. But I want to thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Drink plenty of water, and I will see you within the next one. Goodbye.